of course now I've trapped myself because they're so big. Hello, Internet. I am making a game, and guess what? I'm going to do it in 356 days. Most people who try to make a game do not meet their first estimate, but I have been told that I make good estimates, so hopefully the person who said that about me was right. Now, let's go over, first let me just boop. Okay, this is what I did in the last week that I started. I made a spaceship. Oh, it flies around. Oh my god, that's a planet. Oh my god, the gravity's sucking me in. Oh no, I flew through the ring. Oh, I got hit by the tree. Oh, let me escape the planet gravity. Okay, cool. That's a procedurally generated planet. That's a procedurally generated planet with more stuff on it. All right, let's go back. So here's the game plan. We're going to make a game. We're going to make it in a year. May not be that game, maybe something else, because right now we are in the exploration phase. We're going to spend 3 months here. Right now we're just messing around. We're learning the engine. I'm using Unreal Engine 5, and I'm going to ship this game on Steam. I'm not going to ship this game on Steam exactly 1 year from the start date. This is the development timelines. Then, right at the end of this exploration window, we're going to lock it down. We're going to pick a concept. We're going to scope the concept exceptionally. The scope is going to be so important because with 6 months to develop for me, and it may be part-time because I may be picking up some part-time work because I quit my full-time job and I'm going to do this now. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And that needs to fit in this timeline because if I take too long and this game drags on and on and on and on, again, we're trying to avoid some of the mistakes that are common with first games. I have 1 year to learn the process, do a bunch of stuff. Then after we do this project, which I'm not expecting to be financially viable, then I'll try to actually make a more financially viable game. But anyway, 1 year, we're going to do it. 3 months of exploration, 6 months of development, 3 months of bug fix and polish, and then figure out the timeline of marketing. So I'm going to be doing updates fairly regularly, so you can come back and check on how this project is going. Right now I'm going to get into some of the more specific details of what I did this week, so if you don't care about any of the technical details, see you later, have fun. But if you do care and are interested, let's go into a little bit of the stuff that I figured out this week. So this week in Unreal Engine 5, I discovered enhanced input system. So they used to have a system, I don't know how it worked because I didn't have to figure that out. But now they have the enhanced input system. So the way that you use this is that you get these input actions, and then you have the input mapping context, and you can have multiple of these, and you can have a bunch of different input actions. So right now I have move, pan camera, roll. I actually pretty sure I disabled. No, I didn't. It's because it doesn't work very well. I meant to like be able to roll the spaceship, but it don't worry about it. That's not a right now problem. And I can fire. And so the way that these are set up is basically you create an input action, and then you can add the description, you can add this other stuff. Also, there's these player mappable key settings. So if you want to be able to remap things, you probably want to get into this. I started messing around with it. It's not the highest priority right now, so I stopped. But you basically just set a value type. So for firing, all I need to know is whether the button was hit or not. So it's just a bool. And then you can add triggers and modifiers to determine a little more granularly if you want to accept that input. And then all of those get added to an input mapping context, which has the actual keys that you want to have pressed. So for movement, you can either use WASD or the arrow keys for mine. And so it has the actual modifiers in here for each of the button presses. And so the modifiers are what's allowing me to choose the direction based on the input for the movement mechanic. So in this case, instead of using X, Y, Z for W or up, I actually want to use Y, Z, X because I want Y to be forward, basically. And then you also can see down modifiers, you negate so that you have Y first, but it's going to be the opposite because you're going down, not up, and so on and so forth. You do it for all of them. Now, the order that these are in here matters because it actually, for each of these, is going to choose the first one. There are issues with simultaneous input. I have not figured out exactly what that is or how that works, but it will choose based on the order in here which one is actually more important. There's also some options. Now, the thing is you can add all of this stuff. None of it matters until you actually add it to your player controller. So if you go to player controller, you need to actually set your input mapping context. So this is not actually just a built-in function. I just made this so that I could throw it in here. What you have to do is get the controller for your, this is a character. So I created I was planning to have this one be 2D. So this is actually a paper character. You would just use a regular character if you were going to do 3D. I'll fix that at some point. But you get the controller for your character, and it's a player controller. And then you get the enhanced input, this, right? And then you add the mapping context. And so the mapping context you choose if you didn't do the actual, take me back. I'm using my input mapping context default, which you'll see was the name of this. I also don't think that this folder structure is the way that the standards have it, but I liked doing it this way, so I did. So that was the first thing I did, was set up input. So I had, like, it was just a little sphere, and I was like, how do I make it move? And then that took me down a whole rabbit hole of learning their new system for enhanced input, starting to put all of that together. Then I got into all sorts of issues with speed and all of these things. If you look at your character movement component, I ended up using flying because that maps a little bit better to what I'm trying to do with the spaceship. So you have to adjust the different speed. So there's speed for flying, there's speed for everything, and there's also braking friction. So if I turn off braking friction, it won't slow down as much, but if I turn on braking friction, if I go forward, I stop pretty quickly. But then if I turn off braking friction, if I make it like 0, and then we look at it, let me move this out of the way again. I just keep going for quite a while. All right, goodbye world. So I thought about leaving this on because, you know, space, gravity, my vision in my head is that I'll have little thrusters. And so based on the direction that you push, it'll show like a little thruster animation. All of this is, again, probably too big for what I need to be doing, but I'm having fun, so we're going to keep doing it. But I felt like it wasn't very satisfying. It's difficult to be able to stop the direction that you're moving. I may end up keeping it like this, so you could just sort of be like, I want to go to that planet, and then you could walk away, grab a drink, and then come back, and it would still be heading towards the planet. But I kind of liked it being able to stop so that you could sort of like reposition, because if I wanted to stop and look at this planet with the friction off, it's kind of difficult to get back to 0 movement with like little touches. But anyway, there's a lot of stuff to be done in the configuration of adjusting your character movement values. And there are just so many options. So it's like really what you have to figure out is what options do you have available to you and how can you mess with them to achieve the effects that you're looking for. Anyway, I also just threw in some basic components. I made a left gun and a right gun as the source points for my firing. I can't remember if I showed you that, so let me just show you real quick. I can fire bullets. Whee! And then this shield I also hooked up so that, and I can hit myself right now. So when it takes enough hits, you lose the shield. And that's all in the player right now. For the camera, one of the things I had tried was regular stuff, but then I realized that they actually already have an add controller pitch and yaw input. So literally you can just grab what you get from the input action and adjust the pitch and yaw with the note that I found that if you alt click, you can break a link. One of these is actually not set by default. So if I hit play now that that's unhooked, you'll see that I don't actually look up and down. I look up and down, but my character doesn't mirror that movement. So I'm just looking up and down. So I can't actually do anything in those directions. Like if I were going to shoot, I can't shoot up. Actually, I can, because I switched that to be the camera direction instead of the player direction. Anyway, if you wanted the character to move, you would just turn these on. So I could also turn them both off, and then the character wouldn't move at all. And I would just be moving around. So like I could mount the guns somewhere and then have it always facing. So like now I can just rotate around the character and then move around this way. So the way I found that out is because it's in the source code. You can find it. But blah, 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 blah. Back to this. Let me go back to what it was before. We'll save that. So after I got movement down, I added the space skybox. So I just found a little space generation little tool, and I created this backing image, which is basically just a bunch of different size pixels of different colors to give sort of an illusion of stars at different distances. And I threw that into a skybox. This is the blueprint. It's just a sphere of the sky. Similar to any of the other skyboxes, and then I threw it in here into the world, and you can, if we go really, really, really far out, I made it massive because I have these giant planets. It may take a minute. I can make it smaller, actually. You'll see that there's actually a whole nother skybox that I didn't even bother removing outside of it, and this is just, just messing around. Then after I got movement basics down and I got my space skybox, I added these this little particle system. So it's actually a particle effect that it just gives a little bit of a more feel of movement when you're moving around. Don't really need to get into that because it's just the particles. It's pretty simple. You can look it up. And then I also added these procedurally generated planets. These ones are still just spheres right now, but this one has at its core one of these procedurally generated PCG items that I then made a stamp of, which basically just makes it its own mesh that's now no longer being generated. But this one I can actually adjust. So there's a PCG component. I have a bunch of these because I was messing around with a couple of different things. This I don't actually use at all. This was just a sample of what a lot of people end up using is the landscape data, but actually I didn't want to generate my objects on a landscape. I wanted to generate them on a sphere so that all of my planets would have very quickly like just a bunch of trees or rocks or whatever it is that I decided to put on them. So I found out that they recently added the ability to use a mesh as the point where you generate the points for. So for the procedurally generated content, procedural content generation, basically you sample, it generates points, and then at those points you can spawn items. And in this case, you can give weight to the items that you spawn. So I have tree 2, a log, and a stump. And so you can see those here. I've got logs, stumps, and then 2 different kinds of trees. And they end up generating at all of these points. And so basically you get the actor, which is the test, the PCG test object that I have. And then at that point you spawn a mesh, which in this case is just a sphere. Right here. Smooth basic planet, literally just a sphere that I threw in Blender and then threw in here. And then you sample the same mesh to generate the points. And this just, I feel like there's got to be a better way to do this, but this is the way that I figured it out, is that you spawn the mesh that you want, you make the same mesh, you could probably throw it in a variable and put it in both or something like that, but you sample the same mesh, and then you copy those points over to the mesh that you created anyway. And then on all of those points, you spawn all of the trees and everything else that you want. So I could go in here and add a bunch of different stuff and make all sorts of different planets. So that is actually really neat, and I thought it was going to be much more complicated than it was, and it took a while to figure out, but actually really awesome. And you can also, there's a bunch of different ways you can do this that I saw. I'm not going to worry about that right now. The important part is that procedural content generation is actually awesome, especially because you can just make the mesh and then you just have that mesh. So not necessarily for procedurally generating while you're in the level, but just to make stuff without having to place it myself on the object is really, really going to be useful. So like, for example, I just put this here today, these rings I made so that you can fly through, and I could put them all over the planet. These I placed manually, but like you could make like a track on a planet that you need to go through, and that'd be pretty cool. So what else did I do? Not that much. That's pretty much it. That's what 1 week gets you. I think probably the most satisfying part is the planet gravity and flying around a planet on the surface. But other than that, I mean, that's what I got. And I'll keep going, trying random stuff, and I'll update here again when I got some more stuff to talk about.